The first approach is that culture is something very refined, very beautiful aesthetically, and it is possessed by individual. So this is a kind of elitist approach toward culture. And when we say that this person is very cultured, it means that his attitudes, his behavior, his personality, his orientation, his talk, his dress, that all reflects something of value which is higher than the common people. So it assumes that there is a low and there is a high in society. So in this approach toward culture, that person is very cultured. He has a cultured personality. So uh, the second approach of culture shares the same meaning of I mean, refinedness and beauty and of value which is higher, but then it is shared by a group or a community or a society. So, or a class, for example. So we have a cultured group or cultured class, and in this sense, the word culture is very similar to the usage of the word civilization. The word civilization is a concept, is a category which is usually used by historians. There have been certain civilizations um, in the human history, in the history of mankind. Toynbee, for example, has discussed that in his magnum opus, A Study of History. Will Durant's famous book is The Story of Civilization, which has discussed many civilizations. So, I mean, these historians tend to assume that not every society is a civilization. They have not discussed the whole history of, they have just chosen those societies which have long established peace and political and social order, and therefore they were able to produce something of higher value in terms of arts and literature and philosophy and different intellectual pursuits. So then that becomes, that social order becomes a civilization. So in this sense, this is also an elitist sense of word. The word culture is used in the sense of civilization, and this is also a an elitist view. We can say it now, but this is a connotation of culture. The third connotation in which culture is used, and that is very important, that this is a totality of all the literary and intellectual pursuits within a society or a group. So when we say that culture of a society, it would mean uh, different intellectual, aesthetic, and literary pursuits. So, for example, we have when we celebrate, for example, cultural day, Pashtuns, for example, or Loj cultural day are these days very common in different universities. Punjabis also celebrate. So, different ethnic groups, different culture groups celebrate their culture. So, what is actually we observe in a typical cultural day are the dances and music and dress, and sometimes their stories and folklore. So it is about their literary things, and things which are communicable, right? So different arts and crafts belonging to that particular group, different things which are related to intellectual as well as aesthetic sense of that group. So so this is the word. We have cultural programs, we have cultural days, we have cultural shows, we have Alhambra Cultural Complex in Lahore, we have the Mall Road Alhambra art, but they don't use the word culture there, Alhambra art concept, but Alhambra Cultural Complex. And this is also interesting that we have art complex and we have culture complex, but they share the same thing. So culture is used in the sense of totality of arts, crafts, and different intellectual pursuits. uh, so in this sense, culture uh, is an institution of society. Culture becomes, in the third sense, an institution of society. The fourth sense And this is the sense, the fourth connotation is the connotation which we have discussed already in Sociology 100 and in all different courses of sociology. Usually, sociologists use the word culture in the fourth sense, and that is the totality of way of life, right? So, we use, for example, uh, E.B. Taylor's classical definition that culture is that complex whole which includes art, belief, customs, law, everything. There is a list. So, or for example, Hutton and Hunt's definition of culture is that culture is everything which is socially learned and shared by the members of society. I repeat, culture is everything which is socially learned and shared by the members of society. So the emphasis in this definition is social learning. Whatever can be learned socially is part of culture. And in this sense, culture, the word, the concept culture basically has been created to contrast it with nature. So we have natural world, we have cultural world. So all that is man-made is cultural world in contrast with all that is in the natural world. So for example, when human beings were eating raw meat or raw vegetables, that was nature. But when they cooked the vegetables and the meat, that was the beginning of culture. So fire, for example, or when they created, if one is living in a cave, that is a natural dwelling. But if one creates a house out of mud or out of trees or out of stones, however simple it might be, but it is the beginning of culture. So culture in this sense is whatever human beings do, and they do, I mean, to protect themselves, to feed themselves, and they develop certain mechanisms and methods, and then these methods are passed on to the next generation through language and through learning. So learning is the, you can say, heart of culture in this sense. So for example, so animals, this is a debate that animals have a culture or not, but if they are just following the instinct, so that is not culture. But if animals really learn, and if they have a heritage and they add or subtract and they just pass on to the next generation, that would be the, so culture is something thought, it can be thought of as a river, as a heritage, right? So now if we use the word culture in the fourth sense, then it would include everything basically. So that doesn't suit to this phrase, the sociology of art and culture, because culture, if culture is everything which is socially learned, then there is a political culture, there is an economic culture, there is, I mean, nothing is really left behind. Nothing is left of the word culture. Everything is part of culture. Uh, then I mean, sociology is study of society. I mean, sociology can be described as the study of culture. So then everything is culture. But when we say particularly sociology of culture, it means we are using it in a particular sense. Sociology of art and culture. So culture would mean here, as we have defined in third sense, that all the, I mean, the totality of aesthetic and intellectual activities. So I think we will use this in this sense, but we will explore more the concept of culture. So we have, my dear students, today started with our discussion on sociology of art and culture. So please listen to this lecture and watch this lecture, and then give me your feedback. If you have any problems, any questions, we can discuss it on our WhatsApp group. Thank you very much.